I wanted to touch on those categories there, the CRM, the project management tool, a time tracker, and a scheduler, because I feel like these are the ones that start to trip agency owners up, and where I see them maybe using a CRM as a project management tool or vice versa, or, completely neglecting one of these and thinking we don't need it because they really don't understand how powerful it can be in their business. So those are some of the ones I really like to speak to.
Hey everybody, today I'm thrilled to be joined by Melissa Morris. If you don't know Melissa, she is the founder of Agency Authority, an operations consultancy for agency owners, and she has 10 years of agency experience to help business owners maximize their team, increase productivity, and grow their profits. All of what we're going to talk about today in the way of our tech stack. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you? I'm so excited for this conversation today.
Me too. I'm happy you're here and I cannot wait to dig in, but I've got to ask the first question. What made you decide to do this crazy thing of agency ownership?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? Because it feels very crazy at times. So as you mentioned, I worked in ad agencies for about 10 years. And when I left the agency I was working at, I was a marketing consultant and on my way to start a digital marketing agency. I was doing some social media management. And actually what I uncovered through the first couple of years of this work is some of the agencies, like partnerships and such I was working with, were really struggling with scaling and growing their own agency. And I was in a unique situation in that I had 10 years at this boutique agency. I wore a lot of hats. I was quickly promoted to client services director. So I had a sneak peek on how agencies run, and early on was involved in making sure things were running smoothly. I was in charge of creating estimates and proposals. I was in charge of scaling, getting more from our current client base. So I knew a lot about that. But a lot of agency owners don't, because they start out, they're doing what they love. They're passionate about marketing. They're passionate about branding. They're passionate about web dev. They're really good at it. And they start building this agency, but they haven't necessarily worked in an agency, or when they did, they didn't get that sneak peek that I was fortunate enough to get. So a few years ago, I started shifting gears and stepping out of doing the marketing myself and really more supporting marketing and digital agencies and helping them to grow and scale their own agencies through operations. And, part of that is their tool stack.
Yeah. And so what kinds of clients do you now serve? Are you just serving other agencies, or what does your client makeup look like?
It is agencies. And so when I say agencies, it's funny, someone recently asked me, well, what do you consider an agency? And I thought, well, that's actually a good question. So really, when you are the agency owner, you're trying to get out of client delivery, and you are trying to have account managers, project coordinators, whatever you may call them. You need somebody else to deliver the strategy, to create the ads, and do that work, and lifting yourself out of client delivery so you can really focus on growth, agency, business development, which is what the agency owner should be focused, can be tricky. And so that's where I like to come in, because a lot of what facilitates that and gets you out of client delivery, keeps you from being the bottleneck, creates that clarity, increases profitability so that you can become an expense of the agency versus the person doing the client work. All of that comes from having really solid operations in place.
Yeah, I could not agree more. So let's start out by breaking down the categories of tools, right? Because there's CRM, customer relationship management tools, there's project management tools, there are analytics tools. So what do you consider essential for a marketing agency's growth, and why? Out of the categories of tools, I guess I should say.
Yeah, there really are buckets or categories of tools that I think every agency owner needs in order to effectively scale. You've already touched on one of them, and that is the CRM, the customer relationship management tool. This is the tool that typically is handling your sales process and can even handle onboarding. So maybe that's automating a proposal and contract. That might involve new client questionnaires, any sort of intake forms. A lot of that stuff can often be handled a CRM. Now we've onboarded the client. Now we have client delivery. This is where the team is getting the work done. Notice I said team, not you getting all the work done.
Key distinction.
Key distinction. The team is getting all of the work done. But there's a lot to do there. We need to manage the deliverables. We want to be looking at utilization rate. We want to be understanding capacity, both at the team level and the agency level. That should be happening in your project management tool. So that's category number 2, the project management tool. I'm going to hear the boos in the distance on this one, a time tracker. I am a firm believer in a time tracking tool. I think Brooke and I are really feeling each other on this one. Even the agency owner, time tracking. So you need a time tracking tool. You need some sort of storage. So maybe that's Google Drive, maybe that's Dropbox. There's, a variety out there. A scheduler, an online scheduler. And then, of course, your typical ones that I think a lot of people already, you're going to need email. Obviously, you're going to want Zoom or Google Hangout or Teams or something like that. But I wanted to touch on those categories there, the CRM, the project management tool, a time tracker, and a scheduler, because I feel like these are the ones that start to trip agency owners up. And where I see them maybe using a CRM as a project management tool or vice versa, or, completely neglecting one of these and thinking we don't need it because they really don't understand how powerful it can be in their business. So those are some of the ones I really like to speak to.
I am so thrilled that you mentioned time tracking because I track my time too. As the agency owner, I need to understand where I'm spending my time. It helps me make sure that I'm giving enough time between sales and marketing, but it also helps me identify some of those problem people or accounts where I'm having to go in and log a bunch of time there. And that helps us, really review if we want to continue to work with those people or those clients moving forward. So I'm just thrilled that you mentioned that.
Yes, I just can never talk enough about it. I track all my own time. And I think you hit the nail on the head. It will uncover maybe some clients who need a little extra love and attention from us. And we can do what we can to make sure we're getting paid for the extra love and attention. It can also be helpful to see how much you're getting pulled into team meetings. That may be an indicator that more training is involved for your team. And a lot of times we spend that time doing work that's not moving the needle forward, right? And then when it's there in that report in black and white, we have to say, okay, we need to get out there and we need to get doing biz dev because we think we are, but we're not.
Right. Right. Well, so tell me about how do we choose these tools, right? There's so many options out there. And now with AI, I was just getting emailed today with some new AI tracking visitor tool. I was like, oh my gosh, there's 16 new tools every day. So how do you pick the best tool for your agency?
That's a question I get asked all the time, right? Which tool is best? And I would say step 1 is look at the buckets. And then know which options are available to you in each of those buckets. And that is a tricky step in and of itself, because you're right. First off, there are so many tools, it can feel hard to know which one's going to work best for you and your agency. And a lot of these tools want to tout themselves as we do everything for your agency and we are the one-stop solution. We can talk about that more later, but that's usually not going to be the case. So when we're looking at a project management tool, and I'm going to speak on this one first because I do think this is one, again, that trips people up often. There is a wide range. Some of them are ClickUp, Asana, Monday.com, Teamwork. I still hear people talk about Trello or Basecamp. I will tell you, if you are running an agency, and you're pulling that off in Trello and Basecamp, show me how you've pulled it off, because in my opinion, I rarely see those being robust enough and having the capabilities necessary to successfully support an agency. So if you're on the hunt for a new one, I would not be looking at those. I would be staying more in the lane of a ClickUp or an Asana. So that's speaking to some tools specifically. But again, right, we have ClickUp, we have Asana, we have Monday or Teamwork. And Melissa says one of these would be good. How do we know what's best for us? Look to your needs first. And this comes from taking a look at your workflows, taking a look at what do you need to track? What do you need to monitor? From there, now you have clarity on what the tool actually needs to be able to do for you. So I think a good example is Asana and ClickUp are very similar, and I see agencies use both very successfully. But Asana can feel a bit more siloed in that it is lacking that high-level view of everything that's going on. And ClickUp does a really good job of that. So in Asana, if you've got to look at a project, I can go look at that project. But it can be difficult to see how that project relates to all the others, right? On that really high level, it feels siloed. Now, for certain agencies, that might not be a big deal. That it may not be a problem for them. But for some agencies, if that feels very important and you put the time and effort to get into a tool like Asana, you're going to be frustrated and you're immediately be going to look for the next one. So write down that list of things. This is what I want my tool to be able to do. I think another great example, and these are simple things, but this is where people get all the way invested in something and go, oh, it doesn't do the thing I need it to do. Recurring due dates. Monday.com does not have a solid recurring due date feature. Their recommendation is push the due date. And for some business owners, that's not going to work, especially a lot of my agency owners like social media, where every month those content creators, right? We need that list back. We need it to come back. We have this recurring. It's a lot easier to just have a recurring due date set up and it to roll through than to, oh, did we remember to push it? Did we push it on which day? So even some small things like that, think about what feels really important and then go find the tool that offers that functionality.
I love that advice. And not to get sidetracked, we'll talk offline, but we use and love Basecamp. So we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it offline.
Okay.
So let's talk about the setup, right? Because we've used and abused and tossed many, many tools in our lifetime. We turn 12 next month. So I would be ashamed to admit how many tools we've onboarded and aren't still using. Yeah. And I think sometimes what gets in the way of the successful use of the tool is that setup period. Mm-hmm. It's so overwhelming. So can you speak to that a little bit for our listeners?
Yeah, it is really overwhelming because let's be honest, when you've gone to grab for a tool, it's probably because you're already in overwhelm and you need help, right? So then now it can feel like an even bigger task, right? Like, oh, now I got to figure out how to set this up. So I recommend you do it in a few phases. So phase one is the basics. So get in what you need and that core functionality. So in your CRM, maybe it looks like getting your proposals in there, getting your contracts, getting your questionnaires in, and knowing how to find and navigate those, knowing how to easily edit, how to maybe track your sales pipeline. If it's your project management tool, know what tasks you need, know what statuses those tasks need to move through. Make sure the team feels really good about finding their tasks and understanding where to look. That's step one. Once we get everybody feeling really good about that, then the next step are dashboards. You want to be able to look into your tool and with a quick view, understand who's in my sales pipeline, how many websites are in development, how many social media clients are we tracking right now, and those high level views, because that is really, really valuable, particularly to the agency owner. And even if you have a project manager or an account manager juggling multiple accounts. So that is always my recommendation for that second step. Let's look at some dashboards. And making it easy. Third step, now we're going to talk about automations or what some tools call workflows. Where can we lean on that tool to give us that extra push? And then even there, start small, right? So I think great examples are if Derek is web development and every task that goes to Derek needs to be flagged as a web dev task. That's a really great automation that will save you a step every time. That makes sure everything that goes over to Derek is flagged as web dev, and we're good to go there. Same thing if we're looking at maybe our content creation every month. If when I assign it to Katie for posting, it needs to be due on the 15th, I can set up an automation that says every time I assign these to Katie, it gets a due date of the 15th. of the month.
Mm-hmm.
So start small and build your automations. But those are the 3 phases I typically recommend when you're starting to set up a tool.
Love that advice. And what about the expense of tools, right? They could be very expensive. We often, at the end of the year, kind of go through a tool audit to see what we have and, make sure that it's getting used. And, can we squeeze them for a cut while they're squeezing us for an increase?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? So talk about how to maximize the tools that you have, because there is such an expense, especially now. I feel like all the tools are raising their prices right now.
Agree. Oh my gosh, Brooke, I love that you said once a year that you look at your tool stack. You are singing my song, girl. And for that reason, it is not uncommon for tools to change prices, to change the features that are available based on the tier or the level. So I say no more than twice a year, but at least once a year, you are reviewing for the tool. You're taking a look at which of those features and functions you're using. Are there features and functions that you're not using? Maybe you could downgrade. Maybe something has changed in your business and there's a functionality you just don't need anymore. Or maybe there are some new ones that they've rolled out. Maybe there's features they've added to your tier that you can begin to leverage. And then the other thing I would say look for is think about those moments when maybe a ball has gotten dropped or something that's still feeling a bit painful. Like, why does this take so long? Why does this task feel so hard? And let's take a look at those tasks, because it might be that the tool you're using to execute that task isn't quite cutting it anymore. And it is time for an upgrade. So at least once a year, right? No more than twice a year. Check, see which tier you're on. And then if you're finding something is painful, a time to revisit. And then the other time I would recommend you do a revisit, if it's not like in a yearly cycle, is if there's been a big change in the agency. If you have suddenly doubled your client load, might be an opportunity right there. If you have onboarded 4 new employees, created a new department or a new position, if there's been a big shift in some way, that's usually a good opportunity to take a look. And there may not be a change needed. That's a good moment to come back, say, let's take a look at our tool stack and make sure things are adding up here.
Yeah, I like that. What about the team? Another fun one. Mm-hmm. How do you get your team using a tool? I'll give a quick anecdote here. Last year, I had talked about this on a previous episodes. I went to MACON, the Marketing and AI Conference, and they were talking about doing these sprints with AI tools to understand, what would work best for your agency. And we came back and said, hey, we should use ChatGPT to help with some brainstorming on content, but not the end all be all. It needs to be judged from there. The team, most of them didn't really want to adopt ChatGPT, even though it's faster and more efficient. So how do you rally around the team and be their cheerleader and get them to use the tools that you're implementing and perhaps paying for?
It really can be a struggle for agency owners. And the first thing I would tell you is remember, which I touched on a bit, you've adopted a tool likely because something hasn't been working, people are overwhelmed, and you need to remember so is your team. Your team is also likely feeling overwhelmed. They're feeling the squeeze of maybe some balls that have been dropped. They're feeling the stress of what's going on. And it can be difficult to now introduce a new tool. We all have habits. We all have a way that we do things. And to shift that habit and the way I work every day, especially if I'm already in a state of feeling overwhelmed, or maybe there's been a lot of lack of clarity around workflows and such, this can feel like a big change too. So my first thing is remember that, agency owners, this is a big shift for them. So knowing this is a big shift for them, what can we do to help them, right? And help guide them through this process? Communication, keep them really in the loop of what's going on. Let them know that you're looking into this, what you're considering, that you've made a choice, that you're in the setup stage. Let them know a little bit what's coming down the pike for them versus them feeling a bit like, hey, everybody, welcome to the team meeting. We're going to use ClickUp starting right now. It can feel like, what has happened, right? And oftentimes, the agency owner may be working with a leadership team. They may be working with someone like me. And there's been lots of conversations about what tool we're going to use and how we're going to integrate it and all the great benefits that are going to come from this. So while the agency owner has been in a lot of conversations and has seen a lot of what's gone into this project, the team is often feeling a little left in the dark. So keeping them in the loop. Training. Right? This is not a one-time training and the team is equipped to run with it. I recommend a series of trainings because just as the agency owner, they're not going to have one call with me and become a master of Asana, right? Like we're going to have a few, they're going to come back with questions. They're going to forget how to do something. We need to make sure that's in place for the team as well. Training. Now, with all that being said, sometimes we do have some stubborn team members on our hands, and the reluctance is strong in them. What you will tolerate will continue. So if you are continuing to go in and adjust due dates for them, if you're continuing to say, oh, they didn't put that task in, or they're neglecting to leave comments, and you're going behind them and cleaning it up, they're going to keep doing it, right? There's not incentive, right? But when they've neglected to change a due date, if you're pinging them with a little comment that says, hey, can you go in and change this due date for me? You're only going to have to do that a few times, and they're going to remember to change the due date. They're going to remember to leave the comments. So I say, first, make sure you have empathy. Second, make sure they're trained. And then if you have done these things successfully and you still have one or two stragglers, sometimes it's just commitment to this is how we're going to do it. And this is the expectation if you're going to work here and getting them on board. Yeah,
that's a super tip when it comes to, what you allow will happen. I really like that. Let's go back to the bucket of CRMs. I'm sure you have a couple of favorites, but if we're just talking about a CRM from the view of improving client relationships and sales around those relationships, what would you recommend?
So it can be tiered a little bit based on the size of the agency. So I would say HubSpot is a common one that I know agency owners look to, but I will also say that one's not for everybody because it can get very pricey. So I think it does a great job for larger agencies who have pipelines that they're trying to manage. They have sales teams that they're trying to manage. There can be a lot said for having something like HubSpot. If you are a smaller firm and maybe there's just a handful of you, that is often a lot more than you need and will come at a heavy price tag. Because while they do have lower tier offerings, it's often not until you're paying several $100s a month that you're able to lean on some of the automations and capabilities that HubSpot has to offer. So with that in mind, I look to a lower tier solution. Something like Dubsado has a lot of automation capability at a fairly expensive rate. Better Proposals I use with a client. This one allows for a more aesthetically pleasing, which can be appealing to certain types of marketers or content creators. Sometimes if you are branding or design, you want something that looks a little more polished, looks a little more aesthetically pleasing. So you could go a route like that. Or if you're just looking for something that has a lot of automation capability, something like Dubsado. And sometimes you can even get away with something like, what was that other one? That one that was popular for a while, like 17 Hats or something like that. Can handle like automating a proposal, a contract, a questionnaire, a follow-up email, an offboarding email. The goal there, I think, would be to get that as automated as possible. And you could get away with that on some of those lower ones. But if you're looking to really manage a pipeline and sales funnel, then probably looking to something more robust like a HubSpot.
Yes. Automation is so important within your CRM. We use Keep, which used to be Infusionsoft, and it used to be synonymous with being expensive. Now it's not. But yeah, the automation it really takes you from from good to great, I would say. So I would, hang on that piece of advice of looking for a tool that can provide those automations for you.
Yeah, and Keep is another really popular one. I have found that some agency owners really struggle, though, with the learning curve on that one. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if you found that to be your experience or maybe how you got around that. But that's typically why that may not be one of my first go-tos is I've had agency owners struggle with it didn't feel as intuitive to them for whatever reason.
Yeah, I was a long time Infusionsoft user way back when, and then came back to Infusionsoft when it became Keep. So that's probably why for me it's very user intuitive, but that's because I'm an OG. So let's talk about project management tools in the same way. What project management tools or which project management tools are your favorite when it comes to keeping the team on track, just like you were mentioning earlier, and ensuring that you're making those deliverables happen for projects in a timely manner?
Yeah, I would say my favorite is ClickUp, and mostly because of its ability to see everything holistically going on. It literally has a mode that's called everything. And the sort and filter functionality of that tool is very powerful. So I can literally tell ClickUp, go find every task that is assigned to Melissa that is past due and high priority. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter what project it's on. It doesn't matter where it's at in ClickUp. It will show it to me. And that I think is very valuable. Now, with that being said, I have seen agencies very successfully use Asana. Asana, I think, is another very popular one among agencies, as is Monday.com. Monday.com has, I think the organization of it can be appealing to people. Folks who very much like that list or that spreadsheet style, I feel are very drawn to a ClickUp or an Asana. Whereas others who don't necessarily need that can gravitate to Monday. Just something about the aesthetics of it feels a little more fun, maybe, right? Like it just feels like there's a little bit more going on there. So those are some of the ones that I recommend that I've seen successfully implemented. Obviously, there are others, and to circle back to what you said, sometimes based on what that agency needs very specifically, something like a Basecamp or something else could work and be very successful. Mm-hmm. But when we're just kind of talking in blanket terms about what really makes sense for a service provider. And the reason I look to those tools is because, again, that ability to really drill down tasks, have assignees, leave those comments with each other and trying to get a holistic view of what's going on. I feel like those tools in their own ways have abilities to shine in those areas.
Awesome. And what about that last bucket we talked about, which was reporting and analytics? I can see the scared face emoji popping up right now.
Right.
But when we're talking about scaling an agency, we need to be able to provide good data and reporting and analytics to our clients. So are there any options there that you find are the most helpful or insightful?
So I actually want to think about that question a little bit differently and through the lens of our own agency and what analytics and data points and insights do we need to be looking at? And I think that's coming back to things like our utilization rate. How much time is the team spending on administrative tasks? Are we accurately accounting for our time to clients? So then that starts to loop back into our time tracker, right? So how much time is being spent on clients, internal meetings, training, and you should be looking to your time tracker to deliver those types of reports and having it set up in such a way so that it can deliver those type of reports. And so if you're finding that the team is spending an exorbitant amount of time under admin or email, it's worth taking a look at because there's probably more to the story. And sometimes they just get frustrated. Why are they spending so much time in their email? My first question is, I wonder if things are getting lumped under email, this blanket email that really should be getting assigned to a client. I see that happen a lot with internal meetings as well. If you're getting together with another team member with the sole intention of talking about a very specific client, those hours get logged to the client. They don't get logged to the agency as an internal meeting. And that's really important because these are the things that start to chip away at our profitability. And we're looking at a certain client or a certain service offering, and we're thinking, well, why isn't this profitable, right? So-and-so really is only spending so many hours on copywriting, and this person's really only spending so many, but we're neglecting to account for those internal meetings. So just a quick side note, anytime you're putting together your packages or pricing things out, you have to account for internal conversations, like an internal kickoff call. If you have a weekly stand-up, right? Like you need to be thinking about how can maybe it's $25 per client, or maybe it's $100 per client, right? How is that cost getting accounted for? And then, an internal brainstorming session that always happens, or an internal kickoff call that always happens. Those are the things that we forget to include and chip away. But that our reports, to come back to your question, start to tell us, right? When we see, gosh, why are there so many internal meetings? Actually, those are client meetings, right?
Mm-hmm. I think this is such an important scenario that you're bringing up, because I feel like a lot of agencies in the early stages, myself included, go through this struggle of, having, if time is being tracked, having that tracking of time and where people put things, which buckets time goes to, is very difficult sometimes to work through. Carlin, who was a past guest on the show, she actually came to me and said, hey, can you just give me a rundown of how y'all use Harvest, right? Because her team, as she was giving them the budgeted hours, they were constantly running over. And I was like, you never give the team the whole bucket of hours. You always have a reserve, because whatever you give the team, they're going to use right up to the end of that or go over. So you've got to think about margins and think about buffers and think about things like onboarding and recording and monthly meetings, just like you said. So I think that is critical advice to listen to if you are a newer agency owner and you are thinking about using time tracking or are using time tracking. I urge you to hit the pause button, rewind, and listen to that advice from Melissa again, because I constantly hear that from new agency owners.
Yeah. And one quick follow-up to that, the idea too of where to put certain things. Even having a very simple time tracking SOP where you are listing those common tasks and addressing the ones that we know are likely going to get maybe confused on where they belong. Having that and presenting it to your team and training them and coming back to that if you see people straying, right? When you see that admin time start bloating again, come back and say, let's review this. Do we have questions? Maybe you need to add a spot as well as your team is growing, or if you are in the process of onboarding a lot of new team members and existing team members are spending some time supporting them, maybe there's an opportunity there where we add a time tracker that would explain all the internal meetings, because then are those client? Oh no, these were going to onboarding and training support there. That if you have your leadership team doing some one-to-ones, maybe you may find that we do want a category for that. So think about it, let it be a little bit of a, shift and flex. And then remember, as long as everybody in your agency is doing it consistently, the data, the trends will. So for example, if somebody else lumps, the time they're spending in their project management tool is admin time, but somebody else puts it as back-end work. Mm-hmm. Right. This agency can call it admin and this agency can call it backend. And that doesn't really matter. What's important though is that everybody on your team is flagging that time as backend work, or everybody's flagging that time as administrative work.
Yeah. Yeah. We didn't talk about content creation and management. So can we touch on that for a minute? What tools do you think are indispensable when it comes to producing high quality or engaging content?
So, if you'd asked me a few months ago, I probably would not have brought this one up, but I do looking more and more to AI is going to be very powerful. And to piggyback off of what you said, I am not a believer that any person's going to just drop something in Chat GPT and have a blog and social posts. I don't believe that at all. I know there's more to it, but to give a specific example, I'm working with a woman and she supports authorities and experts in their area with video content creation. And she spends a lot of time writing scripts that is in their tone and in their voice and working with them so that they can have these videos, they do the shoots. Well, this was a very time-consuming process. So what she's actually been able to do, though, is through her interviews and conversations with her clients, she is able to put that into Chat GPT or your AI of choice and prompt it through so that it starts spitting out some really good stuff. Now, of course, with that being said, ChatGPT or AI was the magician. She could have handed this to any team member and they could dump it in and it would be, but that's not true. She was still doing it. So then we had to dig a little deeper and say, well, what is your process, right? What are you thinking about as you're prompting it? How many prompts are you going through? How are you getting it to spit out something that's really quality and effective? And so we've created like a content creation SOP that uses that tool, but is incorporating her secret sauce and her years of strategy and industry knowledge and her experience with the clients so that we can train another team member to lean on that tool in the same way. So I know it's, been kind of a hot topic and hot debate there, but I think exploring that and seeing how you can just use it to amplify your own strategic mindset and goals and thinking about it in that way. How is Melissa or Brooke or, in the sense of my client, how are they able to prompt and get quality stuff, right? Quality content out of that. And let's look at what that process is.
I think that's brilliant advice. And that leads me to another question, which is there's so much happening right now in the tool world, especially because of AI. So when you think about the future of tools and agency owners, are there any emerging tools or technologies, AI is one of the obvious ones,
one of the obvious ones, yeah,
that you think marketing agencies should be looking at or keep an eye on to make sure that they're staying competitive with other agencies and just in the market itself?
So to bring this full circle here with the tool conversation and to come back to what we talked a little bit about before, which tier are you on in your tool? What are the features and functionality? A lot of tools are starting to roll out variations of some form of AI. And so I think that's something to keep an eye on. With that being said, I'm not necessarily an early adopter of these kind of things. I also tend to have a motto of if it's not broken, let's not fix it. But with that being said, I think keeping an eye on it. So something I'm keeping an eye on is, some of these project management tools are incorporating AI where they can go and find, and, one of the examples I saw was it would reference almost an SOP. So you could ask, I think it was ClickUp, whether you could ask ClickUp, what is X, Y, and Z? And it's going to go and retrieve from the agency's SOPs the best way to handle that scenario. And I thought that could be really powerful in terms of training, consistency among client delivery. These are some of the things that agency owners really struggle with. And if you can get that stuff out of your head and into what I love to call your best practice documents, these could even almost become a bit searchable, right? Right within the tool. So these are some things that, me and the team that I work with are exploring and seeing how can we look at that. So I think just continuing to keep an eye on what does your current tool stack offer you? What are they doing in terms of new technologies and what may be available? And can you use that? And is it something that can make your life easier every day?
Yeah, really good advice. And I just think AI is going to make these tools so much more powerful, which will therefore make you so much more efficient, which is good for everyone. Last thing here, Melissa, if any of our agency owners who are watching are listening, maybe want to get a hold of you to ask some advice on tools or maybe utilize your services to help with some of those SOPs that you talked about, can you tell everyone where they can find you and what you're working on?
Yeah, I actually have something special for Marketing Agency Show viewers or listeners. So the first 5 people who email me, I'm going to give a free 30-minute tool audit to. So we are going to look at your tools, what you're using. You can tell me where you're feeling stuck, what questions you have, and I'm going to take a look and give you very specific advice and feedback. So to take advantage of that, send me an email, Melissa, MELISSA @youragencyauthority.com, and just put in that subject line, MAS, Marketing Agency Show, MAS, free tool audit. And we'll get going and we'll get you scheduled. Now, if you're not, don't worry. If you're not one of the people or you're not listening in real time, head over to youragencyauthority.com/quiz. And there I have several questions that I'll ask you, and then we're going to give you results that are specific to your agency. And it will tell you maybe some of the areas you need to look to start improving your operations, get tool stack buttoned up, so you'll get custom results there. So book the call if you can. If not, head over to youragencyauthority.com/quiz and take that.
Fantastic. I love how much you are going to bat for everybody who's watching and listening and their tool stack. This has been so incredibly helpful. Look at all the notes I took, y'all. Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much, Melissa, for joining us. And everybody who's watching or listening, we will see you next time.